Hey everyone, I just got back from Cuba a couple of weeks ago and man, what an experience. It's a beautiful tropical island with plenty of things to do, to see, people to meet, things to eat, wonderful culture, wonderful scenery, wonderful food. Traveling there though is very different than the rest of the world, and there are a couple things that you need to know before you go there. Some things I learned the easy way, some things I learned the hard way. So this isn't a full travel vlog. Please subscribe for that one, it's coming. And without further ado, here are 4 things you need to know before you go to Cuba. Okay, so number 1, housing. So there's 2 main types of housing in Cuba. You can either stay at a hotel or resort, or you can stay at what they call casa particulares. Those are basically people's homes that, they've rented either a room or a couch or a mattress in the living room for you to stay. Okay, yeah, so if you're staying at a hotel or resort, you probably have everything covered, so you're probably not even needing this video that much. But if you're doing individual travel like I was, you're probably going to end up staying at a casa. Wonderful experience, highly recommend it. And they're everywhere in Cuba and in all the major cities. You can identify a casa by the sign on the front door or in the front of the building somewhere, and that means there's a room to rent or possibly a place to stay at that apartment or that building. You can really rent casas in 2 ways. You can show up, go knocking on the doors, seeing if there's a room to stay, scouting out the room, and then staying there. Or if you're like me, you can go on Airbnb and reserve them that way. They're going to vary widely from, very modern new apartment with a kitchen and everything else to a couch in the living room. And you got to check it out and see them. The ones on Airbnb tend to be more on the apartment side of things, with air conditioning and so forth. So if you want something nicer, go over there. Otherwise, check it out. There's tons and tons of casas all over Cuba. The other thing about the casa experience, it's not just about the apartment, it's also the host. Like with any Airbnb, you have a host, but in this case, your host is so much more than just a host. From my experience, they're incredibly warm and welcoming and helpful folks. But your host, it will also kind of be your concierge for your trip. They're going to be your point of contact for things like booking taxis, getting currency exchange. I'll talk about both of those things in a little bit. All the way to getting, in some areas, it's hard to buy water and soap and things like that. And so they're going to be your point of contact for that. In Viñales especially, they really were the person to book all the tours for you and make sure you have all your activities lined up and even provide a little bit of like a lay of the land. So yeah, make sure you talk to your casa host. They're going to be incredibly helpful and central to your stay in Cuba. All right, number 2, currency. Okay, so if you read a lot of the guides online, they're going to say that there are 2 types of currencies in Cuba. There's the CUP and the CUC. Forget about all of that. That's no longer true. In 2021, the government got rid of the CUC. There's only the Cuban peso, the CUP. Doesn't make it any easier though. And here's why. Unfortunately, right now, Cuba is going through a bit of an economic crisis, and that means the inflation on the peso is incredible. What does that mean for you as a tourist? Well, it means the exchange rates are all over the place. And it means that a lot of tourist-facing businesses would prefer to take US dollars or euros rather than pesos. Now, if you do pay in pesos, they're going to use what's kind of essentially the street market rate to convert. And so when I was there, it was around, 170 pesos per US dollar. But, and here's the issue, if you go to the official currency exchange like you find at the airport or in the major city centers, they're going to give you a much lower conversion rate, something on the order of like 100 to 120 pesos per dollar. And that means you lose money if you pay in pesos, if you convert at the airport and then pay in pesos. So long story short, keep your dollars and your euros. They're gonna be useful. But you still need pesos because taxis and a lot of restaurants still take money in pesos primarily. And so you want to convert, again, go talk to your casa host. They're going to be able to hook you up, and they'll give you a conversion rate that's probably a bit lower than the kind of street rate. Like, so if it was 170 on the street, it'd be like 160 through your host. But it's going to be a lot more reliable than relying on the random people on the street that are shouting at every tourist saying, money conversion over here. Yeah, I don't really trust those guys. Go to your casa host. So long story short, don't convert all of your money at the airport. Hold on to your euros and dollars because you're going to need them to pay for things like tours and bike rentals and so forth. And your casa host can help you convert the money. One more thing. Make sure you bring euros or US dollars. I've met a wonderful couple from Canada that brought primarily Canadian dollars. And they had a heck of a time getting those exchanged anywhere or accepted anywhere. So yeah, make sure you bring US dollars or euros to Cuba. Okay, so number 3, internet. There are really 2 ways to get internet in Cuba. There are the Wi-Fi cards and getting a SIM card. And I'll go through both and you can decide which way you want to go. Wi-Fi hotspots are pretty prevalent in Cuba, and more so in the recent years. A lot of the casas will have them. A lot of the hotels will have them, and cafes and things like that, even public parks. But you can't just connect and use them. When you connect, you need to put in your account information, and you need to buy a timed Wi-Fi card from the communications office in Cuba. Okay, so the only communications company in Cuba is called Ecteza, and they have offices all over Cuba, and there's one in almost every major city, at least one, many in Havana. And you need to go to one of these offices and buy a timed Wi-Fi card that will give you access for some number of hours at any of these Wi-Fi hotspots. So you need both an accessible Wi-Fi hotspot and a card. Some casa hosts will give you a free hour or more, but that's very dependent on which casa you stay at, and please ask your host if that's available. I actually recommend the second option, which is to buy a SIM card. So to get a SIM card in Cuba, you first need a SIM card capable phone with a physical SIM card. Sorry, iPhone 14 users, you're kind of out of luck here. They don't have eSIMs in Cuba yet. And the other tricky bit is you gotta buy the SIM card online, and you can't just walk up to the office and buy it. So you're gonna be picking them up at the Ecteza offices, just like the Wi-Fi card, but you need to buy it online before you get there. And preferably before you even get to Cuba. So to buy a SIM card, you can go to this website here and pay $35, and they'll give you a pretty generous 6 gigs plus a large number of SMS and calls. You want to buy that before you get to Cuba because there is actually an Ecteza office that you can pick up the SIM card in the airport before you leave customs. So it's like right next to the baggage claim. And right there you can put in the SIM card and connect to the internet. This is super useful because a lot of the casa hosts use WhatsApp for communication. If you want to be able to contact your host to organize a taxi from the airport or something like that, you need that internet connection right away. And the reason I say you should buy it before you get to Cuba is the internet in the airport is not necessarily open. Like, you need to put in your passport number, and I think you need to go through immigration before it'll connect. Anyways, I wasn't able to get it to work, but the SIM card worked fantastic. Signal's not super amazing outside the city, but you can get reasonable connectivity everywhere. I wouldn't expect to stream Netflix at 4K, but if you want to send photos to your friends, it will work, no problem. One more thing about the internet, whatever option you choose, make sure you download a VPN app before you get to Cuba. I recommend Proton VPN. It has a good free option. There's dozens of other providers. Pick one. If you're already using one, that's great. The reason is there are certain things that don't work in Cuba, like the Apple App Store. So if you need additional apps or whatnot, you're gonna need to VPN in first. And you don't want to be stuck in a situation where you need to download the app, but you can't get to the App Store because you don't have a VPN. So you're stuck. So download that VPN app, make sure it works before you get to Cuba. Number 4, and that's getting around. So I'm going to talk about 2 types of transportation. One is like within the city, and the other one's between cities. So within a city, your best bet is taxis, and they're kind of come in many forms. There are bike taxis in the tourist areas. There are regular car taxis. There are old American cars driving around, and there are also La Nave. So the regular taxis, your casa host, even waiters at restaurants can call them for you if you need transportation, or you can flag them down. Make sure to negotiate a rate before you leave. They'll either want dollars or pesos. It's kind of all over the place, and they're all kind of different. If you don't want to deal with that, the easiest way, provided that you bought that SIM card at the airport, is La Nave. What is La Nave? It's basically Uber. If you've ever used any ride-sharing app, it'll feel just at home to you. Open it up, call your ride. It is in Spanish. You got to put in all the addresses in Spanish. Call your ride. They only take payment in pesos, so make sure you have some pesos in cash. And the rates are also substantially lower than you would get from a regular taxi. Now, don't expect to be super cheap. Because of all this inflation, like taxi rides are still around like $5 or $6. It's not that different than the US. If you have a SIM card, you can use La Nave. You might have to VPN to download the app from the App Store, but it'll work. It's great. It's just like Uber. Call your ride, get in the car. A lot of them are these like really old Ladas from the Soviet era. Kind of quaint, and they're all painted white. It's kind of interesting, and even the icons on the map are these old Ladas. It's kind of interesting. It's a good experience. I enjoyed using La Nave. Okay, so that's within cities. Between cities, you're kind of going to either have to book a private car or take a colectivo, which is a collective taxi. Both are great options. The colectivo is going to be much cheaper, probably about 1/4 of the cost. You're going to share it with another 3 people going from the same locations that you are. It's kind of like an Uber pool, but like for between city, like 2 or 3 hour drives. Yeah, it's a great option. It was a great way to meet other travelers in Cuba. And, you know, conversation, you're stuck in a car, you're gonna talk, right? And yeah, it was a great option, and I enjoyed taking the collective taxis. They're gonna want to be paid in euros or US dollars though. They really did not like pesos. I tried. So make sure to have some of that handy. To give you guys a good impression of how much it would cost, Havana to Viñales was $20, which is not bad for like a 3-hour ride. So yeah, colectivos, great option. These you're gonna want to book through your casa host. Okay, so if you're not American, you can stop watching the video right now. Those are the 4 things that I would find super useful if I was going to Cuba. If you're American though, keep watching. There's a couple more things. Okay, first thing, you can't actually legally stay at a government-owned hotel or patronize certain restaurants. The US State Department has a list of them. The restaurants won't check, but I believe, and I didn't stay at any of these, so I don't know, but I believe the hotels will check your passport and they won't let you check in if you're American. So you're probably safer going with casas particulares for your accommodations. Okay, second thing for Americans. When you book your ticket, and also when you book things like Airbnb experiences, you're gonna need a provided reason for your visit in Cuba. There's a bunch of them that are valid. I'm not gonna go through all of them. I would say most people who are traveling there individually for tourism are gonna fit under the support for the Cuban people. And if you read the description for that, it's stay at casas, go to private restaurants, do activities with Cuban people, take salsa classes, take cooking classes, and so forth. That's probably what you want to do anyway as a tourist wanting a cultural experience in Cuba. So this category is pretty highly recommended. Okay, one last thing for Americans. You can't actually withdraw money from ATMs using your bank card. So please bring enough cash. Anyways, that's all. I really do recommend going to Cuba. I think it's a fantastic experience. Keep an eye out for that travel vlog. Please subscribe. And I hope you guys find that helpful. And yeah, till next time.